Lakes are supposed to be permanent. They sit there for thousands of years. They are heavy, they are massive, and they don't just go away. But on November 20, 1980, in Louisiana, a 1,300-acre lake filled with 3.5 billion gallons of water vanished. It didn't evaporate. It didn't leak slowly. It was flushed like a giant toilet. In less than 3 hours, a massive whirlpool formed that swallowed an oil rig, 11 barges, trees, docks, and 65 acres of land. It even made a river flow backwards to fill the hole. How did this happen? It happened because of a tiny math error. A map was read wrong, and someone drilled a hole in the wrong place. This is the insane, true story of the Lake Peigneur disaster, the day Earth opened its mouth and swallowed a lake. Hit that like button if you love engineering disasters, and make sure to subscribe. Let's dive in. Chapter 1. The Setup. To understand this disaster, you have to imagine a layered cake of geology. Layer 1, on top. Lake Peigneur, a beautiful, shallow freshwater lake in Louisiana. It was a popular spot for fishing and boating. The water was about 6 feet deep on average. Layer 2, underground. The Diamond Crystal Salt Mine. Directly underneath the lake, there was a massive salt mine. For decades, miners had been carving out huge tunnels 1,500 feet below the lake bed. It was like a giant underground city made of salt. On the morning of November 20, 55 miners were working down there. Layer 3, the intruder. Texaco Oil. Texaco wanted to drill for oil. They believed there was oil under the salt mine. So they set up a massive $5 million oil drilling rig right on the surface of the lake. So you have miners digging for salt below and oil drillers digging for oil above. It was a risky setup, but it was safe as long as nobody made a mistake. Chapter 2. The Pythagoras Mistake. The Texaco engineers had maps. They knew exactly where the salt mine was, or so they thought. They planned to drill safely past the edge of the mine. But they made a mistake in triangulation. They used the wrong coordinate system. They thought the rig was positioned safely away from the mine shaft. In reality, due to the calculation error, the massive oil rig was positioned directly on top of one of the mine's main tunnels. It was like trying to drill a hole in the wall to hang a picture, but accidentally drilling into a high-voltage wire. Chapter 3. The Stuck Drill. November 20, 1980. Early morning. The drilling crew on the floating rig was hard at work. At about 1,200 feet deep, the drill bit suddenly seized up. It got stuck. The crew was confused. We should be hitting soft soil, they thought. They tried to pull the drill loose. Suddenly, the rig jolted. It tilted. The drillers heard a loud pop, then a screeching sound, metal on metal. The 150-foot-tall oil rig began to lean over in the water. The crew captain realized something was terribly wrong. He yelled, "Abandon rig! Get off! Now!" The workers scrambled onto safety boats and sped away towards the shore. They looked back in horror. In the shallow water, the massive $5 million oil rig was sinking. But it wasn't just sinking. It was being eaten. The lake bottom had collapsed and the rig disappeared under the water in minutes. Chapter 4. The View from Below. Meanwhile, 1,300 feet underground, the 55 salt miners were having a normal shift. Suddenly, the lights flickered. A strange wind began to blow through the tunnels. Then came the sound. A roar, like a freight train. Water started gushing into the mine. The drill had punctured the roof of the salt mine. At first, the hole was only 14 inches wide, but the water from the lake rushed in with such high pressure that it dissolved the salt instantly. The 14-inch hole became a 5-foot hole, then a 50-foot hole, then a massive crater. The mine foreman screamed, "Evacuate! Flash the lights!" The miners had practiced evacuation drills, but never for a flood. They raced towards the elevator shaft. The water was rising behind them, dissolving the pillars that held the roof up. If the power went out, the elevator would stop, and they would all drown in the darkness. Chapter 5. The Whirlpool of Doom. Back on the surface, the lake was going insane. As billions of gallons of water poured into the mine below, it created a giant whirlpool. It was the largest man-made whirlpool in history. The water was spinning so fast that it generated supersonic winds at the center. The whirlpool began to suck in everything. The drilling platform, gone. Trees, large oak trees on the shoreline, were ripped out by their roots and sucked into the center. Docks, a nearby botanical garden, Rip Van Winkle Gardens, watched as its entire dock and a newly built house slid into the abyss. But the craziest part involved the barges. There were 11 massive steel barges on the lake, used for carrying drilling supplies. The whirlpool grabbed them like they were rubber ducks. People on the shore watched in disbelief as these giant steel ships spun around in circles, faster and faster, and then were sucked vertically down into the hole, gulp, one after another. Chapter 6. The Miracle Escape. Underground, it was a race to death. The water was chasing the miners. The wind pressure caused by the rushing water was so strong that it was blowing people over. The 55 miners packed into the elevator cage. It was a slow ride up, 1,300 feet. They could hear the mine collapsing below them. The earth was shaking. As the elevator reached the surface, the miners ran out. They looked at the lake. It was gone. Instead, there was a muddy, swirling nightmare. They had escaped with only minutes to spare. But the disaster wasn't over. The lake was now empty, which meant something else had to fill it.
Chapter 7. The Backward River. The hole in the bottom of Lake Panure was insatiable. It had swallowed the lake, the oil rig, the trees, and the barges. But the mine was huge. It still wasn't full. The lake was connected to the Gulf of Mexico by a narrow waterway called the Del Cambray Canal. Usually, water flows from the lake out to the ocean. But as the lake level dropped violently, physics took over. The suction was so strong that it caused the Del Cambray Canal to reverse direction. For the first time ever, the Gulf of Mexico began to flow backwards into the lake. Salt water from the ocean rushed inland. As this massive volume of water hit the empty crater where the lake used to be, it created a 150-foot waterfall. For a few days, this accidental waterfall was the tallest waterfall in the state of Louisiana. It was a roaring cascade of ocean water filling up a hollowed-out salt mine. Chapter 8. The Cork Effect. For 2 days, the chaos continued. The air pressure inside the mine was going crazy. As water rushed in, air had to get out. This caused massive geysers of mist and debris to shoot up out of the mine shafts, blowing 400 feet into the air. And then, something even stranger happened. Remember those 11 massive steel barges that were sucked down? Once the mine filled up and the water pressure equalized, the barges came back. Like corks held underwater and then released, 9 of the sunken barges suddenly shot up to the surface. They popped out of the water, battered and dented, but floating. It was a ghostly sight, steel ships rising from the dead. Chapter 8. The Miracle. When the dust settled, the authorities assessed the damage. A $5 million oil rig destroyed. A multi-million-dollar salt mine ruined forever. 65 acres of land gone. 3 dogs missing. But then they counted the humans. Rig workers, all accounted for. Miners, all 55 accounted for. Local fishermen, a man named Leonce Vierre-Prejean, was fishing on the lake when it drained. He'd tied his small boat to a tree, but the tree was sucked in. He managed to untie it just in time and paddled to shallow mud. He survived. In one of the most destructive industrial accidents in history, 0 humans died. It was a statistical miracle. Chapter 10. The Aftermath. The landscape was changed forever. Lake Peigneur used to be a freshwater lake, averaging 6 feet deep. Today, it is saltwater, or brackish lake. The deepest point is now over 200 feet deep. Because the ocean water filled the lake, the ecosystem changed completely. Freshwater fish died out, and ocean species moved in. You can now catch saltwater redfish in the middle of Louisiana, miles from the coast. Chapter 11. The Blame Game. Who paid for this? Texaco, the oil company, and Wilson Brothers, the drilling contractor, tried to blame the map, but eventually they realized there was no defending the math error. They agreed to pay $32 million to Diamond Crystal Salt for destroying the mine, $12.8 million to the Botanical Gardens for destroying the land and nursery. It was an expensive math mistake. Chapter 12. The Legacy. If you visit Lake Peigneur today, it looks calm. It looks peaceful. There are beautiful houses on the shore. But locals know the truth. They know that underneath that calm water lies a ruined city of salt, the wreckage of a massive oil rig, and perhaps the ghosts of the trees that were swallowed whole. It remains a warning to engineers everywhere. Measure twice, drill once, and never, ever underestimate the power of a simple decimal point. So, the next time you make a small mistake at work, maybe a typo in an email or you forget to attach a file, just remember, at least you didn't flush an entire lake into a salt mine. I want to know, what is the biggest mistake you've ever made at work? Tell me in the comments. I promise I won't judge. If you enjoyed this story of the disappearing lake, please smash that like button. Subscribe and ring the bell because next week we are covering the story of the man who survived 2 nuclear bombs. Thanks for watching and stay dry.